He begged the jury to spare his life, but when the verdict came, not even he could hold back his tears. These are real killers. Their final moments in court before hearing the words, "sentenced to death." Some stayed silent, some broke down, and others smiled. What you're about to see isn't a movie. These are the real reactions of people facing the ultimate punishment. And it all starts with a man who claimed he wasn't a monster, until the truth proved otherwise. He said he wasn't a monster, but the things he did proved otherwise. This is Anthony Kirkland, a man whose name still haunts Cincinnati, Ohio. Between 2006 and 2009, he kidnapped, assaulted, and strangled 4 women, 2 of them just teenagers, then burned their bodies to hide the evidence. For years, Kirkland slipped through the cracks. But when DNA from his final victim, 13-year-old Esme Kenny, matched his own, his luck ran out. In court, he tried to sound remorseful. His voice shook as he apologized, not for his crimes, but for how things turned out. The public didn't buy it. The families didn't either, because throughout his trial, Kirkland barely showed emotion, until the moment he realized what was coming. When the jury found him guilty of 4 murders, the judge read the words he feared most, "sentenced to death." For the first time, the mask cracked. The man who once showed no fear begged for mercy. He told the court, "I don't deserve to live, but please, spare my life." Some jurors said his confession sent chills down their spines. But mercy never came. The verdict: 4 death sentences, 1 for each victim. As the courtroom erupted, one prosecutor called him the worst of the worst. And for once, almost everyone agreed. But if Kirkland's reaction was filled with regret, the next killer's was the complete opposite: calm, cold, and terrifying. He didn't beg. He didn't cry. He just stared, like he'd already planned every moment that would follow. This is Donald Smith, a man who turned a child's kindness into her worst nightmare. It started on a quiet evening in Jacksonville, Florida. 8-year-old Cherish Periwinkle was shopping with her mom when Smith approached them, smiling, polite, pretending to help. He offered to buy the little girl clothes, saying his wife had a gift card to share. But there was no wife. No gift card, just a predator waiting for his moment. Minutes later, he walked out of the store with Cherish, and she was never seen alive again. When police caught him the next morning, his story collapsed instantly. Every word, every detail, was a lie. In court, prosecutors called it pure evil dressed as kindness. But even then, Smith showed no emotion. As the judge read his sentence, death by lethal injection, he sat motionless, hands folded, eyes forward. Not a tear, not a word, not a flicker of guilt. One juror later said, "It was like he wasn't human." Another said, "He looked proud." Some killers break when justice comes. Smith didn't break, he smiled. But the next man on this list didn't need a smile. His silence said everything, and it was colder than any words could ever be. He didn't flinch when the verdict was read. No tears, no panic, just a cold stare that said he already knew what was coming. His name was Donald Smith, a man who hid behind a friendly smile. One night in Jacksonville, he walked up to a struggling mother and her little girl inside a department store. He talked softly, offered help, even promised to buy them new clothes with a gift card. To the mother, he looked harmless, almost generous. But it was all a setup. Minutes later, he walked out of the store with 8-year-old Cherish Periwinkle. She never made it home. Police found him the next morning. The lies unraveled instantly. Every word he'd said, rehearsed, deliberate, designed to gain trust. Prosecutors called it evil wearing a polite face. And they were right. During the trial, Smith sat still. No emotion, no regret, as if the entire courtroom was invisible. When the judge finally spoke the words, "death sentence," Smith didn't blink. He leaned back, almost relaxed, eyes fixed straight ahead. One juror later said, "It felt like looking at a statue." There was nothing there. Some criminals collapse when justice hits. Smith didn't. He looked satisfied, like the outcome was part of his plan all along. But if Smith's quiet pride felt disturbing, the next man's silence was worse, because he showed nothing at all. No tears, no begging, not even a blink. When the judge read his sentence, he looked straight ahead, like he was listening to someone else's story. This is Thomas Nuff, a man whose crimes were so violent, even investigators struggled to describe them. He didn't act out of rage or impulse. He planned, calculated, waited. In 2012, Nuff was convicted of taking 2 lives in a crime that seemed to have no motive, no reason, no purpose, no emotion. During the trial, prosecutors described him as a man without empathy. And they weren't exaggerating. While his victims' families broke down in court, Nuff just sat there, completely still. No reaction, no remorse. Even when the jury announced the death penalty, he didn't move. One reporter in the room said, "It was like watching a ghost sitting in human form." Another described him as a man already gone. Psychologists later said Nuff might have enjoyed the control, not the act itself, but the power that came with it. That's what made him different. He didn't kill out of passion or chaos. He killed because he could. And when the gavel came down, his expression never changed. Cold, empty, unreachable. But the next killer didn't hide behind silence. He laughed, and what came out of his mouth left the entire courtroom frozen. Most killers stay quiet in court. This one couldn't stop laughing. James Holmes walked into a movie theater in Aurora, Colorado, in 2012, and turned a night of excitement into horror. 12 people lost their lives. Dozens more were injured, but what shocked the world even more was how he acted after. When he was caught, his hair was dyed bright orange. He told police he was the Joker. And in court, his behavior was just as disturbing, staring blankly one moment, then grinning the next. Prosecutors described him as a man chasing chaos. Some believed it was an act, a desperate attempt to appear insane. Others said it was real. Either way, no one in that courtroom would ever forget his face. During sentencing, as the judge read life without parole, Holmes barely reacted. No regret, no anger, just that same empty half-smile. A psychologist later said, he looked like he was watching someone else's trial. Families cried, survivors shook, and Holmes? He just sat there, calm, detached, almost proud. But the next man didn't hide behind a mask or a story. He claimed every horrific thing he did was an act of faith, and that made his crimes even harder to believe. He said it wasn't murder. He called it a sacrifice. Joshua Cook believed he was living inside a movie, The Matrix. To him, reality wasn't real. Every person around him, every voice, every face, was just part of the simulation. And when his mind finally broke, he decided to break the system, too. One night in 2003, he picked up a shotgun and turned it on the people who had raised him, his own parents. When police arrived, he didn't run. He calmly said, "I did what I had to do." In court, Cook smiled as psychiatrists tried to explain his state of mind. He told them he'd been chosen, convinced that ending lives would somehow free him from the illusion. The jury didn't see a chosen one. They saw a killer. As his sentence was read, 2 life terms without parole, he nodded, almost relieved. Later, he said prison helped him wake up from the Matrix. But for the families who lost everything, that revelation came far too late. Cook claimed he found peace behind bars. The people who knew his victims never did. But if Cook's crimes came from delusion, the next man's came from pride, pure, unshakable pride in what he'd done. "I have no regrets. I'm proud of every decision I've made." These weren't the words of a man broken by guilt. This was Peter Absanu, sitting in court with a grin on his face while the jury recounted his crimes. On Christmas Day 2010, Absanu appeared at his mother's house in a car she didn't recognize. He confessed he had done something terrible, something that would take him 6 months to get away from. When she asked what happened, he lied. When she pressed further, he laughed. Days later, police discovered 2 men shot to death in their home, and Absanu was the prime suspect. His defense claimed he was innocent, caught up in a scheme for survival. But nothing could explain his own words. "I have no regrets. I'm proud of every decision I've made." Letters he submitted to the court later shocked everyone further, showing a mind utterly without remorse, even celebrating his crimes. When the jury finally delivered the verdict, Guilty of 2 first-degree murders, robbery, and fraud, Absanu didn't flinch. Instead, he flipped off the courtroom. A man who hurt others for fun, and wore his pride like a badge. But if Absanu's arrogance shocked the courtroom, the next man's long trail of terror across decades would make even seasoned detectives shiver. For nearly 2 decades, he vanished. No trace, no pattern, just a city left with questions and fear. This is Lonnie Franklin Jr., later nicknamed the Grim Sleeper. From the 1980s to 2007, women disappeared from Los Angeles streets. Bodies were found in alleyways, some barely recognizable. And for years, police had zero leads. Then, after a 14-year break in the killings, another woman's body appeared, the same signature. And suddenly, the city realized the nightmare hadn't ended. How was he caught? Not by luck, not by eyewitnesses, but by technology. Investigators used familial DNA, matching Franklin's son's DNA to cold cases. It led them straight to Franklin's door. In interrogation, officers tried to get a confession. He denied everything, calm, collected, chillingly confident. "It's not me," he said. Every detail of the evidence stacked against him, DNA on every victim, couldn't shake his composure. Finally, after years of terror, Franklin went to trial. No confession, no emotion, but the jury had enough. Guilty on all 10 murder charges. The judge handed down the death penalty. Franklin never spoke again, but his decades-long reign of fear left an imprint the city would never forget. From elusive ghosts to tearful killers, the courtroom has seen it all. But the next story is heartbreak like no other, and it involves the most innocent victims of all. For nearly 20 years, he disappeared without a trace. Women vanished from Los Angeles streets. Bodies turned up in alleyways. No witnesses, no clues, just fear. This was Lonnie Franklin Jr., later known as the Grim Sleeper. From the 1980s until 2007, he terrorized the city, striking repeatedly and then vanishing. For years, police hunted in vain. Then, after a 14-year pause, the killings resumed. Another woman was found dead, the same signature as before. The city realized the nightmare had returned. How was he finally caught? Not by luck, but by familial DNA technology. Investigators matched DNA from Franklin's son to the cold cases. A breakthrough that led directly to Franklin's door. During interrogation, he remained calm, even as the evidence piled up. "It's not me," he insisted. DNA was on every victim, yet Franklin didn't flinch. At trial, no confession, no emotion, just silence. The jury didn't need words. He was found guilty on all 10 murder charges. The judge handed down the death penalty. For decades, he haunted a city. And though justice finally came, the shadow of the Grim Sleeper will never fade. From an invisible predator to a father-turned-killer, the next story is the most heart-wrenching yet. And it involves the most innocent victims imaginable. He took them from school. One by one. 5 children, all 11 or younger. And in the end, none would survive. This is Timothy Jones Jr., a man whose crimes shattered an entire family and a community. On August 28, 2014, he abducted his 5 children, leaving chaos in his wake. Days later, their bodies were found in a field in Alabama, 6 hours from their home in Lexington, South Carolina. When questioned, Jones admitted every detail. He forced his oldest son into punishment. When the boy didn't survive, he killed the others, one by one. In court, Jones broke down. Tears streamed down his face. "God, I'm sorry," he cried. But remorse came too late. The horror was already done. His father, forced to face the aftermath, could barely contain his grief. The children's mother testified, her heartbreak clear. "I can't bring myself to want anybody to die. But this is something I have to live with." The jury reached their verdict. Death penalty for Timothy Jones Jr. Even as the sentence was read, the courtroom remained heavy with sorrow. This story isn't just about crime. It's about loss, pain, and the devastating consequences when trust is betrayed in the most unimaginable way. From the heartbreaking to the vengeful, the final cases show killers who faced justice, and the reactions were as diverse as the crimes themselves. She laughed at the law. She mocked the courtroom. She killed for survival, and for revenge. This is Eileen Wuornos, a woman whose crimes shocked Florida and the world. In the 1980s, she worked the highways as a sex worker. But desperation and survival drove her to murder. She killed 6 men, claiming self-defense, but her methods were cold, calculated, and deadly. In court, Wuornos showed no remorse. When asked about her victims, she shrugged, smirked, and sometimes yelled. "I know I was raped. I had to do what I had to do," she said, unapologetic. Her sentencing was swift. Death by lethal injection for the murders of Charles Humphreys and David Spears. She even taunted the court, "I'll probably see you all rotten in hell, while I'm up in heaven." On October 9, 2002, Eileen Wuornos was executed. Her life ended, but her story remains a chilling example of a killer entirely unrepentant, fearless even in the face of death. From unrepentant defiance to disturbing obsession, the next case dives even deeper into the darkest corners of the human mind. Some crimes defy belief. Some criminals defy understanding. This is Mark David Latunsky, a man whose darkness went beyond murder, into the unimaginable. In December 2019, Latunsky lured 25-year-old Kevin Bacon to his home under the guise of a date. What happened next turned a normal night into horror. Latunsky killed Bacon, and then, in a disturbing confession, revealed he had consumed part of his victim. Not out of necessity, not out of survival, but by his own twisted choice. He explained every step calmly, detailing how he prepared and ate part of bacon, even describing it as if it were a recipe. The courtroom and police were stunned. Psychologists called it a chilling example of a mind utterly detached from humanity. With overwhelming evidence and his own confession, his lawyer advised him to plead guilty. The jury didn't hesitate. Latunsky was spared the death penalty only because Michigan law does not allow it. He received life in prison without the possibility of parole, the only way to keep him from harming anyone again. Some crimes leave questions we may never fully comprehend. Some killers leave a mark that chills the soul. Mark David Latunsky is one of those marks. 10 killers, 10 stories, each shocking, each unforgettable. Some sought chaos, some sought control, some lost all humanity. And while justice was served, the echoes of their actions remain, reminding us how fragile trust and life truly are. 10 killers. 10 lives destroyed. Some acted out of rage, some out of delusion, some out of pure calculation. Each story was different. Each story was horrifying. From the emotionless and the proud, to the chaotic and the unrepentant, we've seen how the darkest corners of the human mind take shape. Some faced justice quickly. Some eluded it for decades. Some begged for mercy. Some laughed at the courtroom. What drives someone to commit such acts? Fear? Power? Delusion? Or something deeper we may never understand? One thing is certain. The consequences are real. Lives lost. Families shattered. Communities scarred. And the echoes of these crimes will be felt for generations. As unsettling as it is, these stories also remind us of something else: the resilience of justice. No matter how elusive, no matter how calculated, justice can, and will, catch up. Remember these names. Remember these stories. And remember, evil comes in many forms, but awareness, vigilance, and truth are the best defenses against it.